All right, here for another edition of the Field of 68's Off the Carousel series. I am Sean Paul, joined by Wright State head coach Clint Sargent. Coach, how does that sound that you're now the head coach of Wright State? After being on Coach Nagy's staff for a long time, it's now your program. How does that feel to you?
It feels great, obviously, a heightened awareness of the responsibility that title carries, but being able to step into that position here at Wright State, at a place that I love, at a place that I've been here now going into season 9, I feel honored to step into it and have had a ton. I think it's just over 3 months that I've been in this position now, and I've had each step of the way and each new role and hat I'm putting on, I've really enjoyed it.
We talked a little bit before recording about the Nutter Center. How is the environment there, and how excited are you to have that just front seat? You get to hear the crowd. How engaging and how fun is that crowd to coach in front of?
Yeah, I mean, I think nationally people know Dayton to be a basketball city, and I've seen it here in our 8 years. Thankfully, due to a lot of great players, we've had a large amount of success, and to see the Nutter Center full and to just see how the community will rally behind a winner, and so many people that have kind of been with the Wright State brand through the years and tasted the winning. There thankfully is that expectation here to do that. They've seen it, so in terms of our home crowds and the support our players get, I think it's special.
So talking about your first roster building, I mean, you guys lost a pair of 2,000-point scorers in Trey Calvin and Tanner Holden, guys that were there for a while. Obviously, Holden spent a brief year at Ohio State, but ultimately he's a Wright State guy. You guys do still return a lot. Brandon Knoll, Alex Hubrichts, Keaton Norris, Andrew Wellage. How'd you go about building the rest of this roster, and what are you kind of expecting from the returning pieces? Are you expecting them to grow? Are you expecting them to play the same role? What are you kind of expecting from this team next year?
Yeah, I think you said a lot of it, thankfully, and I like the point of a Wright State guy, because that is something that we are trying to hold on to. I know we're in a different era of how you construct a roster, but it's important, to me and our staff and what we've had here, that our players understand the value in a career at one place. Obviously, there's a million different ways people look at it now, and I understand all those. But here we think real impact, real development. That's an important word for me in a lot of different areas. We speak a lot about preparing you for what's after basketball. In that development, I've found is really done relationally, and those relationships, if you can have them 2, 3, 4, and sometimes 5, 6 years right now in this era, I think you can really develop a young man in all areas. And we're going to see that with this year's roster. You look at Brandon Knoll and Alex Hubrichts, they're both going into their fifth year. Andrew Wellage, their 5th year. Keaton Norris, redshirt, he's going into his 4th year. So a lot of guys that will no doubtly make a jump in production, because they'll have a longer runway in terms of role, where last year was primarily, you saw Tanner and Trey with some of that offensive autonomy, I'll call it, that can really speak to the growth on the floor. But I'm seeing those guys grow in so many different areas off the floor, that I think in terms of a fabric that you'd like to have, a team DNA, to win and win consistently, I think that has to be there. That continuity, just relationally, just going through things off the floor. I believe in that, and we have a number of guys that I think not only they do, but their parents kind of understand that, and in the culture here that's been set over 8 years, and even before my time, in Coach Nagy's time, with some kids that love Wright State and love the brand of Wright State, want to grow with it. I think all that still plays into it nowadays. I know you can set a roster in a year and win. Plenty have done it, but I think here to be consistently at the top of your league and be in contention, if we can grow with our players. So a lot of those returning players, Logan Woods, Dre Carter, Solomon Callahan, who redshirted last year, I think all those guys that are already in the fold of what our fans know on our roster, are going to make big jumps for us. So how do you blend in your retention of your current players, and then sprinkle in some transfers and some freshmen that can all make for a very balanced roster and a very competitive roster. I think we have that.
You talked about balance and you talked about building relationships. I think kind of the biggest thing is that you kind of noticed with Wright State with Coach Nagy and now you is obviously you played a role on his staff before is that you return a lot of guys, kind of the same deal last year, not huge on adding like 6 7 transfers, a lot of guys returning. Ultimately, how do you attack the transfer portal? Do you go get guys that are going to play a certain role? Or are you getting guys that you think are going to be like high level starting impact guys? What kind of is the process for you in finding the right transfer for Wright State?
Yeah, I think, it's all those things certainly, but primarily I think the evaluation is you're trying to factor in their heart and their mindset to come into a place where winnings happen. You are returning some players that expect an awful lot of not only themselves, but their teammates to be quote unquote right-minded about this. And you're not bringing in a selfish mentality, not a me mentality. Now, I'm not naive. I understand that's a part of this deal, and any great competitor has a healthy amount of that. But we're looking for, humility to come into a room and say like, yeah, I probably don't have all the answers. I think I'm a good player, but so how do you mesh that? Because the best teams I've seen and been a part of that personality.
There's been some good ones too.
Yeah, that just takes shape, and there has to be that foundation of like at least a willingness to read the room and understand the room. And I think our room for the 3 transfers that we brought in and 3 freshmen, I think it's a pretty special room. So trying to evaluate that, within the basketball practicality of it, we're trying to get a little bit more athletic. We need to get better defensively, just in terms of our versatility and how can we guard different positions and throw different looks. So within the portal, we wanted to add some of that, but also give enough runway for the guys we currently have on our team in a competitive aspect to carve out enough for them. So we're not promising playing time. We don't feel like we have to go to the portal to become something. We're just trying to, infuse our roster with different pieces in terms of athleticism, but the same in terms of humility and understanding, hey, like this isn't going to be all about you. It's about something bigger. And if that's a fit for you, that resonates with you, this is a great fit.
Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with Coach Scott Nagy. Like, obviously, you coach for him. You were with him at South Dakota State, and now you kind of spread your wings a little bit without him. How different is it going to be for you without him around?
Yeah, he's, first and foremost, he's a man that impacted me greatly, apart from basketball. Now, like a lot of these relationships we all get to have as coaches, it's all through the vehicle and the lane of hoops that provides just this, this vulnerable, real, authentic platform to have relationships with your players. And I had a special one with Coach Nagy at South Dakota State, where I was learning a ton, just like our players are now. Went through some real life. Dad was sick, and he was there, and I just was able to see up close and personal how to handle adversity. Coach Nagy's very real, very authentic, and learning from that, not only playing for him, but then being on his staff for 10 plus years. He was just an open book. So he never hid anything, very, very honest with the good and the bad and everything in between. I think that more than anything has helped me prepare me to step into leadership and responsibility. And how do you do that in a real authentic way?
Can we look forward to a Wright State Southern Illinois matchup at some point in the coming years?
Potentially, that would be a
Okay.
lot of fun.
All
That would
right.
be a
Well,
lot of
there's
fun.
some people who don't want to play like guys they're tight with, but it seems like you're down for it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'd be I think for coach, and I think, even for him at South Dakota State, I think there's a unique, it's competitive. Don't get me
Mm.
wrong, be ultra competitive. But there also has to be a healthy amount of just appreciation for what he did here, what he did at South Dakota State, really every stop that he's had, to have fun with it as well.
If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 throughout the year. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use bonus code FIELD, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. The best part, all you need to do is deposit and bet $10 of your own hard-earned money to be eligible. Here's how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using that bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. BetMGM is going to have some fun offers available throughout the NBA playoffs. Bet insurance tokens, odds boost, and what I love, a nice parlay boost or two from time to time, as well as a ridiculous array of player prop bets for any sport that you could possibly imagine betting on. BetMGM is and always will be the king of the prop bet. So go download the BetMGM app, use the bonus code FIELD, and sign up today. And while I've got you, a quick request. The best way to support the Field of 68 content that you get for free is to engage with us. Rate and review the podcast. Like and share the YouTube videos. Tell your friends about us. It all helps in a world where the algorithm is king. And now, back to the show.
So how would you consider yourself as a coach? Are you more of an analytically minded guy? Are you more of a feel guy? How do you describe your kind of style as a coach?
Yeah, I think there's hopefully a blend of both, but if I had to pick one, more feel, I'm very high on emotional intelligence and just having a feel for your players and where they're at mentally and emotionally. I believe in offensive autonomy. I've seen it be very dangerous. Our guys having, freedom to go and be and create and imagine how they can score the ball and how they can create action. But then I've also seen, defensively where there has to be technicalities, absolutes. You got to be connected. And all of it's a very complicated puzzle you're putting together, and you can't really put the pieces in the right place if you don't have a feel for the room and where guys are at mentally and emotionally, where they're struggling, and all. It just goes back to that relationship. I feel like when I see things clearly for them is when I'm connected with them. I know where they're at, and if I have that, then I think I have a pretty good feel of when to do what. But it's certainly, I think that has to be the most important factor.
So kind of related to that question, I always think this is an interesting thing to ask coaches. So let's say the scenario, there's 3 seconds left, 4 seconds left. You're up 3. Are you fouling? What are you doing?
Yeah, I think you foul. Now I know
Every time?
yes.
Okay.
I mean, I like it. I think you have
I'll hold you
to
to that.
Yeah, I think you have to be as absolute in some of those situations for your players, just to remove clarity. I mean, any fogginess and uncertainty, just try. And there's always going to be some in-game slippage, but I think as much as you can, and I've learned this already with our team, if I can, anything we're doing, ball screen coverage, any philosophy, if I can let them into my thinking and explain all the context of it. Now, it's not always black and white, but if you can educate your team as much as you can, then you at least have a chance to discern in game, in moment, different dynamics. And in that situation, I believe in fouling. Yes.
I mean, it's kind of crazy just sometimes seeing like, man, it looks like they want to foul and then just doesn't happen. I think that just comes to the in-game execution, like you kind of mentioned there.
Yeah,
Things
just
can
trusting
definitely change.
yourself to make
Hmm.
exactly. It's just like, on the offensive side of the ball, so much of it can be instinctive because you've done it over and over and over. You're not thinking, how often can you go over those situations where your guys just feel comfortable, even though the stress and the pressure in the moment is magnified, where they feel like they've been through it enough in their mind and they've heard it spoken over enough where they can, calm themselves down and make the right decision. Much easier said. It all sounds good
Yeah.
over a call, much harder to do in the moment.
It's easy to do right now, probably in practice, but once you get on the court with fans and all the
Exactly.
added pressure, it probably intensifies a little bit there. But
Yes.
just getting more into your time at Wright State, ultimately, what has been one memory that stands out obviously an NCAA tournament appearance, some other winning seasons, but what ultimately stands out the most for you, and what is your biggest memory at Wright State?
That's a great question. You know, 2 years ago we won at UD Arena. You know, in the first 4 game against Bryant. You know, and there was a stretch in the second half where the lights went out, that kind of lost power, and it was just it was as silent as could be, and "Let's Go Raiders" kind of echoed throughout the arena. So having that moment in our community on that stage, the locker room after that, you know, you get to celebrate with your team, then you hop on a flight and you fly out to San Diego, and you're preparing for 1 seed Arizona. And you know, the beginning of that year, we were 2-7, and it was low and heavy because, you know, up until that point, we had won 4 straight years of a championship, whether a regular season or a tournament championship. And you're kind of sitting there looking at somebody who's been there through all of it, like, man, are we slipping? Are we, what's wrong? What are we doing as coaches? And then you fast forward a few months later, and you're having that moment with your players, their parents, my family, and you're flying out there, and it's just how quickly it can all change. And you know, just the journey of that year, I think, taught us a lot. And each year teaches you a ton. But to have those milestone moments and to be able to capitalize and win and look back does an awful lot, even for the current guys who were on that team that maybe weren't playing. Like Brandon Knoll was redshirting, and Alex Shubricks was redshirting. So to have that memory to draw back on, not only the highs of it, but, you know, going back to the lows and how we kind of figured it out, I think is a good component again to development and kind of steering the ship through a long season.
So another thing, obviously, regular season titles. Past, if you want a regular season title, you didn't win the conference tournament, you're playing in the NIT. Is that something you'd like to see change? Obviously, out of your control, but is that something you would like to see change for a school like a Horizon League team to be able to play postseason basketball in an NCAA sanctioned tournament like the NIT?
You know, I think so. I think as a coach, looking back, you know, the NCAA tournament appearances are what's celebrated. Again, you get I just gave you that memory.
Yeah.
But I think looking back, the regular season titles, I mean, that's a 3-month process.
Yeah.
That you've just been consistently better than everybody else. You've just been consistently more right-minded, more disciplined, more connected. And I think all the coaches would like that to hold a little bit more weight to it all, because we all know, man, if you get that done, like the year Oakland had last year, that's the standard. If you can get both done, I mean, I don't know how many times that's happened in Horizon League history. I know probably the last 13 years, just a handful of times where your regular season champion wins your conference tournament.
It's pretty rare. Yeah.
It is rare. But I think as a coach and in terms of the job you're doing, that speaks. You know, I wish that was rewarded more. But yeah, I think in a perfect world, there would be another term. I wish the NIT was still in play, because I think those regular season champions deserve a platform to play and kind of have that respect.
And a lot of the high major schools that were, you know, in the first 10, 14 teams out of the tournament, a lot of them opted out last year. So I think that opens an opportunity for a lot of mid-major schools like you guys, obviously, to be in that mix, to play some postseason basketball. And obviously, we've seen some mid-major teams like Lipscomb a number of years ago win a lot of games in the NIT. So I think it would be really beneficial, but it's good to get your point of view on that for sure.
Yeah.
So So looking forward to next season, this is kind of how I like to round out each of these interviews. The one thing for Wright State to do in order to be successful is what?
Well, defensively, we have to have an identity, and you know, and I think that's it. I mean, I think offensively, we have a number of guys that I know what we lost, and you said it, 2,000-point scorers. You know, really 3 Hall of Famers, in my opinion, out the door, and coach and Trey and Tanner, and then a number of you know, AJ Brown. Like the offensive part will no doubtly be some of the narrative, but I think our defensive identity and if that can be in place and we can be connected on that end of the floor, and I've said this team reminds me a lot of the team we had in 2018 here at Wright State that went to the NCAA tournament, just some of the personalities, again, some of the humility and willingness to be connected, and just a very healthy point in their careers where they've had success, but they really want more. And there's a large part of this thing that I think for us and me, obviously, is unproven. And I think unproven typically people would view as there's going to be a healthy level of skepticism over this team. And I like that because I think it'll groove our team and draw us closer. And I think if we can allow that to be the constant, I think that the identity piece will be there and it'll be real.
So that'll round it out for this edition of Off the Carousel with Wright State head coach Clint Sargent. Thank you, Coach, for coming on and taking the time with me. We all got a great insight of what to expect from Wright State basketball in 2024-2025.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for your coverage on mid-major hoops.